Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the CCO Follow podcast. This is a really exciting episode for me because we have a really special guest on. Navon Aikens is
I thought you were going to say
us.
Travis.
Yeah, well, Travis is always special.
I'm not special with him anymore.
But
I'm, in fact, wrote in routine, which is what we're going to be talking about.
Yes, and we're also introducing the new topic of the month. And as you know, it's December if you're watching this live or when we're recording it. And that means the holiday season is underway. We've had Thanksgiving. We're leading into Christmas. And we're going to be talking about holidays in a way that we can still be purposeful about remembering and resting on the goodness of God within them, and not just having them become routine like a Travis on the podcast.
Like a Travis on the podcast.
And so we're just really excited. Navon, I'm so excited that you're here.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
And just for those who don't know, Navon used to work with us at CCO. He's now in California.
Where it's sunny.
But I'm a little bit jealous of that, to be honest.
The thing is, when you live up here, you get used to just like the rain. So you're like, oh,
No, you
I'm
don't.
over it.
No.
I feel like, so do you guys like the rain?
No.
Or are you like,
no. Like, not used to it. I'm not going to tolerate it anymore.
But it smells so much better up here.
It
like
does.
you guys aren't dealing with
I will
smog
say
and
that,
all that.
The
So.
air
There's
is
no way.
definitely
You got to get a lot of
thicker.
plants for your office.
And
or
it's not 110 degrees for like 2 weeks. We had that not too long ago. So
Yeah,
that
you
was
stay
rough.
indoors for that.
Yeah,
Sounds
that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But anyways, we're happy to have you on.
Yeah.
And Navon, just to kind of kick off this month, what's your experience with the holidays and keeping, I don't know what the term would be, like keeping Christ in the holidays, keeping Christ in Christmas? I feel like we've covered this a little bit before. But
yeah, I mean, we did Advent last year, which for a lot of people is a new perspective, a way to look leading up to Christmas. Right. But the reality is if you do Advent every year, even that becomes this kind of rote routine. Yep. And so, like, how do you reignite your passion for the God who the holiday is celebrating? Yeah. How do you come at a new perspective or appreciate an old perspective?
And this is talking like Christmas, Easter, specifically
Pentecost,
those holidays.
The reality is like Jesus warned the Pharisees, like, you heap up empty phrases. And it's not that the phrases were bad. The bad part was that it became empty for them. Yeah. That they no longer were seeing the value in each word. And I mean, this can happen. This really applies to the entire Christian life because we read the same 66 books over and over and over again. We study the same passages over and over and over again. Like, so how do we follow this God who's infinite, yet we celebrate the same holidays every year? We read the same book and study the same book, not to say that those are bad things. That's the way it is set up for a reason. Yeah. But we can turn it into a bad thing where we just stop appreciating its depth and value and start becoming just really rote and routine with it.
Yeah, and I have a really great answer for it. But before I answer that, Navon,
let's see how good of an answer you have.
No. Yeah, like what's your experience on this whole topic here?
Yeah, I think it's tough because rhythm is actually good.
Totally.
There are some healthy rhythms that we should have in our life. But like you're saying, like if we're just constantly saying the same things and if they don't have, like you're saying things but you don't mean anything by it, or you're going to church but you're not really taking part in what the Lord is doing, you're kind of missing the point.
Totally.
And so I think for me, I have the honor of like teaching middle school students. And so we do an Advent series every year. So I've been there for about 3 years now. So we do that during December. Yeah. And so as I'm getting ready and preparing for those teachings, I'm thinking through like, okay, what does this mean for me? Obviously you're touching on different passages and trying to make sure you teach the passage accurately. Yeah. But you have to think about, okay, how can I teach this simple enough for a kid to understand, like a middle school student, and apply it to their lives? And I think if you're able to boil it down for them, it helps you understand it a little bit more, because we have like Christianese, and Christianese is basically just things that we say as Christians over time. Yeah. We can repeat things and it's like, but we're not explaining what we're saying.
Like what does propitiation really mean?
Yeah. And so I think for me, like Advent, the Christmas story, if we're not really like talking about it in full detail, then kids are just growing up with like, oh, my parents told me this story, but like, what does the story mean to you?
Yeah. Well, talking about your middle school, like how you said you've done it for a few years now, like how old are your middle schoolers? Like, is it like a 3-year process, a 2-year process, and then they're on to high school? And like, how do those, like, let's say you started in 6th grade for one kid, and now he's going to be in 8th grade, going to be graduating. Like, how do you keep it fresh for them?
This is his 3rd time possibly listening to the same, not the same sermon, but the same, same direction of a sermon.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think middle school kids aren't listening all the time. So, and the thing is, I feel like, say if you're teaching through the book of Romans, is it wrong to teach through the book of Romans more than one time? You know what I mean? Yeah. So I feel like there are some scriptures that you refer to a lot more because they might have more impact. All the scriptures are good, but sometimes you need to touch on them more. And I feel like the older I get, the more I realize that I need to hear the same thing over and over again. That's know?
Good, yeah.
So
what about in your life? Like, have you ever experienced times? Because I can admit for myself, like I've experienced seasons of my life where it feels like I've gotten through the holidays and been like, well, what changed? You know, like it didn't hit me, and not that it didn't hit me, I just didn't kind of step up and really soak myself in the truth of that holiday. So what about for you? Have you ever experienced any of those times?
Yeah, I think for me, I feel like for me growing up, Christmas was fun as a kid up until about middle school. And then my family kind of had a situation where we weren't as close anymore. We had some family conflict. And so we didn't do a lot of family things anymore. And so it kind of just became, it's Christmas, so I'm going to go home, I'll get a few presents, and then I'll move on. Yeah. But as, I became a Christian, I started to realize there's like significance behind the holiday that we're celebrating. Yeah. And maybe I should explain a little bit more. Like when I got saved, I went to Bible college as a non-believer, and I went in January. And so for me, it's not so much about, I love Christmas, but I feel like when it's winter time, I go into a deep reflective season because that's when I got saved.
Sure. Yeah.
And so usually around November, December, I start to reflect on the Lord's faithfulness in my whole life.
Yeah.
Because in Delaware, we get all 4 seasons. And so I think
what?
Some people aren't in California. It's just hot and a little bit cold.
Oh, totally true. When we were in Florida, they would tell all the kids about all the seasons, and our kids were like, when do we get snow? And we're like, never. When you travel other places, you'll get snow.
You'll just read about it. Yeah, that's it.
Exactly.
So for me, it's like, okay, summer, it's obviously you're out having fun, you're at the pool, and then as it gets towards fall, you're seeing all the colors change. And then in winter, for me, it's just like, okay, everyone's kind of in the house a little bit more. It slows down. And so naturally, I have that roadblock in my mind of like, you know what, Navon, slow down and just kind of think about it a little bit more. Yeah. So I think that's been helpful for me. It's just like taking that time to go, you know what, like not too long ago, I didn't know the Lord, and I'm sure that'll change as I walk with the Lord longer and longer. But I feel like I have that natural reminder with the seasons, like Navon, slow down.
There's a few things that you're igniting in my mind, and I'm just going to answer it now from my perspective.
All right.
And it's kind of, there's maybe twofold, threefold, who knows how many examples I'll give, but the first one for me is what I've learned, because I grew up in a Christian household. I grew up as a Christian, and so like for me, there was always an emphasis on, for Christmas at least, was the baby Jesus, and he's being born, and what does that mean for us? Yeah. And it just kind of hammers home. And over time, I think as a kid, you begin, as a kid, you're not really thinking about others. Yeah. Maybe you are, and you're a great kid. I wasn't like that. It was all just kind of my own world. And over time, it's like I just kind of get used to the same old thing. It's not exciting for me anymore. It's not fun for me anymore. Me, right? And so I just realized, kind of getting into adulthood, that the holidays and what makes certain holidays special, the reason why we even have them, to remember them, is I think it's important to be intentional. There's our word, intentional, about whatever that holiday is. Being really intentional and focused, and that takes effort for us, but it also takes us to say less of us and more of okay, what's actually happening here. And then the second thing is, I've learned, and maybe you've learned this too, and maybe you've learned this too, Travis, that there's, no matter what year or season that you're in, it seems like there's always someone that gets to experience that specific holiday in a new way. Yeah. So I'm thinking right now for you, you have a little boy now. Yeah. Christmas is kind of this, it's happening soon, but it's going to be this exciting new thing
Or very stressful.
Yeah.
You know,
or
I mean, not only that, he was born on Christmas Eve, so we have to think about that too.
Yeah, that's super cool. I didn't even remember that. That's awesome.
Christmas Eve, baby.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like you get to experience what the Lord does through these holiday seasons in a new way, because you have a kid, and maybe, you know, for your middle schoolers, again, like they're hearing it in a different way. They're getting to experience, maybe this is the first Christmas that they actually aren't focused on Santa Claus and more focused on Jesus. And that's a big thing.
Yeah.
And so when we begin to get outside of ourselves, I think that, and like, get outside yourself and be intentional about what the holiday is. I think that, to me, is like my answer, my antidote to this routine, boring, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think about that, Travis?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about the getting out of yourself method, I think there's a lot of different ways you can make things special again and bring different perspective. The nice thing about that one is because getting out of yourself connects you to dozens of other people. One, it reinforces community, but then also second, like, it forces other perspectives, because naturally it's other people. And so they're, like you said, going through different things, different perspectives. And so I think a lot of other things you can do to like bring other perspectives and stuff like that are strategic and good. But that one just has it by default, which is nice.
Yeah. What about you, Travis? Have you ever experienced seasons or times in your life where you've just felt, this is just routine?
Oh, absolutely. Especially, you know, the busier years, the years where there's just more stress with work or with kids or with, you know, what have you, family issues. You know, the more other things going on, the easier it is to crowd out your heart and the other things going on, you know. So I think the busier the year is, the harder that is.
How do you deal with that as someone who works at a church?
Yeah,
because we, like, all of us work at a church, and so we obviously are the ones putting on the, you know, the Sunday service or the Wednesday service or the Christmas Eve. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually thinking about other times, not times working at a church, but I guess for working at a church, you know, it's very easy. And, you know, I sometimes remind people on the worship team of this specifically, of like, you know, by the time Sunday's here and we're singing a song with people, you've already sang that song dozens of times. And so now it's like, how does that song, you know, and, you know, at this point, you know, the last 2 weeks I've been unarchiving our Christmas songs and, you know, looking at what new Christmas songs do we introduce. And so by the time Christmas is here, it's like, I've already been thinking about it for, you know, a month and a half. So yeah, I mean, there is that aspect, because being at the church, you're already naturally in it even longer before other people. So in some ways you have a longer opportunity to appreciate it, but you also have an opportunity for it to become just this, like, it's just there.
Why do you think that is? Maybe it's really obvious, but why do we fall into that busyness or that routine?
Well, I think there's a phrase like familiarity breeds contempt. And I think it's familiar. You know, it's the story's familiar. You know, how many times
it's why I got so excited that Navon was on the podcast,
because he's unfamiliar.
Unfamiliar face.
Exactly. I mean, how many times has someone, you know, started saying a quote or a Bible verse, something like that, and you finish it, but you're not really thinking about what it says, because you're like, you know, I already know where it's going. And it's like, well, that's great, you know where it's going, but are you appreciating it in this very moment? And it's very easy to be like, well, I have appreciated that in the past, and now I'm just bringing it back to memory. And it's like, that's okay, I think, in some context. That's, you know, it's but it's not. We should make sure we're careful with that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you mentioned it. I mean, we all work in a church, and there's some uniqueness to that, and part of that is, you know, we're like, how, you know, I think about even if you're not working in a church, how do you get up every day and, like, how are you so excited about Jesus when you get up every day and you're doing it over and over and over and over again? You know, you're reading the same things, doing all these things. Like, what is it that causes us, or that gives us the ability to even be excited?
I mean, obviously, it starts with Jesus. You know, that's the number one answer. But really, I think the Bible talks a lot about thankfulness and gratefulness, and actually having a joy resting upon what Jesus has already done. And so I think a lot of people, especially in American culture, like, are you happy and have joy in Christ if he doesn't give you anything else for the rest of your life? And a lot of people are like, yes, until it happens, you know? And that's me too, because we all struggle with that. But really having, like, a joy and satisfaction in the Lord. And so when you're satisfied in him, you can really just trust all of his plans. And so...
I mean, deep gratitude. I mean, we just celebrated Thanksgiving, and what happens the day after Thanksgiving? Everyone tries to buy more stuff. I'm so thankful and grateful for all these things. Look at all these sales. Buy it now.
Now I need more.
It's you know, Navon and I kind of talked, like I've talked to you about this a lot about, well, what would it be like if you were living didn't have a home or whatever, like would you still be joyful and all these different things? And it's hard because I think we're also still battling this flesh, this meat suit that we're wearing here that is sinful in certain ways. Like how do we even step outside of that? And I think the answer is like what you're saying is like the Holy Spirit is indwelling us. Like that's, if we believe that, then to live that out is as simple as dying to ourselves and like being, again, focused and intentional about, okay, what is the Spirit doing?
Yeah.
And I've learned when I do have those seasons, and I guess this is my question for you, is like when I've had those seasons, I've learned that the way that I've gotten out of those is by getting into community. It's by reaching out. It's by calling Navon or calling Travis, whatever it is, and be like, I'm not doing well. And that community and encouragement and stuff really helps. But what about for you guys? Like, what are some ways that you've gotten out of those funks?
You can go first. Let me think about that one. Yeah.
Just the funks of it being rote and routine.
Yeah. And maybe even that's like every day when you come into the office.
Your whole life. How do you get through it, man?
Yeah.
Like, how do you endure?
We're going to hug after this.
I'm starting to think like this month we're talking about, this thing, but in a way we're talking about like, how do we keep joy? Like, how do we keep our joy?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, I guess that's a different answer. When I think about how do you keep from things getting rote, I think about making micro changes that
do everything with your left hand.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm left-handed, so that's easy.
Me too.
He's like, I'm locked in. Wait, you're both left-handed?
Man, where have you been?
Yeah.
Like, over half the staff is left-handed.
Yeah. You left and it got even more.
Yeah, the ratio went up when you left.
That's terrible, man.
I think about micro changes. And, this past Wednesday, teaching on this idea, I gave a lot of examples, but, there's micro changes that you can make that just help bring different perspectives. So like if you're used to, maybe you read the book of Luke in December, a lot of people do stuff like that. It's like, well, have you ever considered reading, the book of Matthew instead? Have you considered maybe reading all 4 gospels, but doing it where they're like chronologically together, just Jesus' birth and that kind of story. There's micro changes you can make of just your routine where maybe you always read certain Advent books or something like that. But you always read at night, maybe reading it in the morning.
Yeah.
But I think, having kids is a really big way to do that naturally because they're always changing.
Sure.
Like you mentioned, like they're growing and stuff like that. And, each year I get to see them appreciate Christmas a different way. I get to walk through different Christmas truths with them in a different way.
Yeah.
Even reading kid Advent books, there's 4 that we have right now, and we've slowly been reading one each year. We're on the 3rd one this year, and with them. And so that's different every year. And so the conversations and the order of things we talk about and what specific things we talk about changes every year. And then by the time we're done with all 4, our younger kids will want to be able to start listening. And so we're going to restart it. But the older kids, we're going to have them more involved. Like, hey, you've already heard the story. You're going to be involved in like leading the conversation. Yeah. And so that changes things and naturally changes things. So, I guess it's changing, micro aspects. There's, I guess the final example is like, there's certain things I pray about often, like fruits of the Spirit or just being filled with God's Spirit, stuff like that. And there's certain phrases that I pray often because I'm like, this really encapsulates what I'm asking God for. Yeah. And if I find myself starting to like just say that phrase, then it's like, okay, well then I'm going to say, I'm not going to change the phrase because like, no, this really encapsulates my heart unless something's put on my heart to say it differently. Yeah. But I'll change like the tempo where it's like, I'm just going to ask for this thing. Then I'm going to pause and I'm ask, and like, they're just changing things helps us get out of the, like just the normal repeat.
Let's not be robots here.
Yeah.
I think for me, something that's always encouraged me is remembering, like in the Old Testament, when a battle would happen or the Lord would do something, they would set up altars and then
build
have their rocks.
So you go all around the church, you work out
we're
just see a bunch of rocks.
Yeah. After this, I'm just going to put a bunch of rocks right here. So, because again, like for me, I have that natural roadblock of like, okay, during November, December, I naturally go into a more reflective, season in my own life because of what the Lord has done.
Yeah.
And so I know when I'm talking to the middle schoolers about like the gospel, it's like we've all heard the gospel. And if they're in our youth group, they've heard the gospel. But like, are you actually engaging with the idea and the truth? Because there is an idea that Jesus died and rose again, but then there's the real truth, like hard facts about Jesus dying and rising again. And I get super fired up about it because I'm like, if you're missing that, of course you're going to have a boring faith.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what Jesus did is not normal. So you really have to engage your faith and be like, wait, do I believe that or not? And if I do believe that, I should have joy because now I have, freedom and I have grace and I can trust God, But sometimes we forget, especially Easter is one of those ones where it's like, oh, we're going to celebrate the resurrection of Christ, which is very good.
Yes, very good.
But every
day of our life as Christians, we should really be celebrating
next Sunday, it's like nothing ever happened.
Nothing ever happened.
And you're like, I'm pretty sure the people who experienced this 2,000 years ago, the next Sunday was just as special. Like they were just still freaking out.
Yep.
Well, we've talked about that sometimes too. Of like, we have such a big service on Easter or a big service on Christmas, and then it goes like, at some point, like, why aren't we just having that more often?
Yeah. And I think that's where I think like making micro changes helps.
Yeah.
Maybe you study the book of Matthew every year when Christmas comes, or Luke. Well, have you ever like really looked at the genealogies and been like, this is what led to Jesus?
Yeah.
Like all of these things, and like look at the faithfulness throughout the genealogies and barely even get to his birth. Like, or, one year when I was teaching the high school, I took the themes of Advent, but specifically focused on like the idea of like, there was a historical thing that happened.
Yep.
And then, you know what I mean? Like there's just little changes.
Yeah. So again, I'm kind of bringing it back to this, like experiencing, like, I guess, what are some things like, how do we experience those things in a healthy way where it's not just, rote, as you would say, like, things of like joy, thankfulness, like those things kind of come to my mind. And there's sometimes like where, and maybe this is totally off topic and that's totally fine, but like maybe there's times in our lives where like, man, we're just not experiencing the joy of Christ. We're not experiencing this, and it doesn't matter. We're making these changes, but it's just like, it's something's missing. Like what would you guys say? I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but like, how would you maybe help someone in that, or help yourself in that if you can? Like, what is...
Have you ever heard of the book called The Dark Night of the Soul?
Oh, I've heard of it. I've never read it.
Yeah, I haven't read it, but someone like talked to me about it. No, I haven't read it.
Tad is like just shaking his head if he heard this. Just like, have you heard this book? It sounds like a great book.
No,
never read it.
I was trying to throw you alley-oops that you talk about because you're the reader. I mean, but no, I've heard about it from a buddy, and so basically he summarized it and talked about how like, when you walk with the Lord for a long amount of time, it's a given that you'll probably go through a season where you don't feel the presence of the Lord. And the thing is, that doesn't mean that the Lord doesn't love you just because you don't feel that way,
Yeah, feelings are terrible drivers. Yeah. They're great passengers.
Seriously. So like, we may feel in moments like, okay, I have this experience where like worship is like great, or I heard something in the sermon, but sometimes we're going to go through a season where you feel like I'm not hearing from the Lord, but that doesn't take away the fact that the Bible says that he loves you. So does that make sense?
No, that's a great, I appreciate that, because it is like, not every Easter for you is going to be like, whoa.
Yeah.
But it like still is.
Just like that.
Yeah. But it still is. It just doesn't mean you feel it. It's like, okay, this is going to sound crazy, you guys.
We're ready.
Maybe I got to take this out of the podcast.
Let's go.
But, well, it's like in marriage, right? Like sometimes you just don't feel like, man, I'm like so absolutely encapsulated in love with this person. Right?
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, can you say that?
Maybe
one more
that's
time.
just
try
me,
again.
and I apologize. But it's like, but the reality is like, I still love this person, and love doesn't just look like the mushy gushy, like I just can't wait to be with you.
To what?
And so it's like,
This is great.
So
I know what you mean, though. I know what you mean.
Molly, I apologize. No, but it's like, I think of it the same way. It's like, there's seasons of that, and there's different times where like when stop when Navon comes in and visits. Is like, I get really excited.
When you see Travis, you're like, run away quick. I see him every day.
After a week, he's over it.
Yeah. But it's true. It's like, and then sometimes like I'll like Travis will do something or say something and be like, oh man, like we're really excited again. But it's
and then it goes back to normal.
Yeah. Cut.
Yeah.
But
this is great.
I think that's the same way, and like what you're saying is so true. Is like your feelings don't drive the reality. They don't. Like reality can be very different than how your feelings are telling you what's happening.
And your feelings don't mean you're necessarily doing something wrong.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that, like, I think of Paul, like he talks about in 1 Corinthians, like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And people sometimes take that, they just take it in a lot of bad ways. It's like, I'm going to be able to win this, sports event because I can do all things. And it's like, chill.
Yeah.
Or they just take it wrong of just like, I'm never going to suffer so much to where it's difficult because I can do all things. And he talks about in 2 Corinthians, and it's kind of funny that it's in the one after. It's like, it's as if he started hearing from them like these wrong things, and he's like, I want you to understand, we suffered so much that we despaired even life.
Yeah.
And he's like very clear of like suffering happens, and like even just dark depression happens. And I think about a sermon from Tim Keller years ago on Psalm 42. Where it talks about the deer panting for water. And he's like, deer aren't stupid. Like, if they're panting for water, it's because the water dried up. It's not because they, like, wandered away and couldn't find their way back. Yeah. He's like, deer aren't stupid. And, that really hit me then, and I've held on to a sense of just, like, there are times where God allows for difficulty to happen. Like, and it's not because we did something wrong. I mean, sometimes it's because of our own sinful attitudes. Sure. Like, there's I mean, we're fallen people. We create our own problems. But there are times where it's like, you're just following God and it's just dark. Yeah. And it just happens for a season. And I think it's God's way of, allowing trials in our life to draw us nearer to himself, to all those different things, to appreciate him in a different light, to for him to comfort us so we may comfort others with the same comfort that God has given us, like all these different good things that God makes out of bad situations. But it doesn't necessarily mean that something's wrong. Like, obviously you should always be asking God, search me, O God, know my heart, lead me. But like, you also don't need to panic like, oh no, something's bad, therefore like I did something bad.
So it's like again, I just come back to this word, intention. It's so important, but it's like...
You have to count how many times you've said that in the span of the
podcast. That's going to take a long time to count, but I maybe I will. You
got to be intentional about it.
Yeah, exactly.
It would take some time.
And so it's true, though, because even like my I guess, experience in this is like, if I'm like going through the season, and let's just take this Christmas, because it's coming up. If I'm doing the right things to try to be intentional about the Lord, but I'm not feeling it. Well, that intention is what matters. Yeah. Because you could even feel like, oh wow, it's snowing out, it's night, and you could get good feelings about it. But if you're not intentionally focused on what the reason of the season it really is, then you're missing out too. So what's more important is that heart intention. And it's also okay to pray. I think that's like another thing that we kind of gloss over sometimes. But like if I want to the Lord's will in whatever aspect of my life, I should be praying for that too. Not just trying to do everything in my power to do it, but like praying for the Spirit to intercede here and for the Lord to provide that. And then the other thing is community, getting involved in community. I think it's so important. So it's like intentional, and then intentionally seeking community.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like Paul reminds us, he says, do not grow weary in doing good, which implies that when you're doing good, at some point you're going to grow weary. Yeah. Like, this is an assumed thing that you will grow weary, and that the people he was writing to were potentially weary of doing good. And he's like, keep going, like, don't give up. And and that applies to all areas of doing good and all areas of following God. Yeah.
And I would add to that, like, the word intentionality, also like committed. And so I think that like when you're alluding to like how marriage is, even if we don't have feelings associated with at the time, we're still committed because we have a covenant with our wife.
Yeah. And there's this foundation that
holds it together. And so even when we're like, oh, I don't feel this way, it's like, you're still committed to your wife. And even with Jesus, I feel like so many people love the idea of like Savior, but not Lord.
Yeah.
And so, and it can go either way, because some people follow the Lord as if you're just my Lord and I'm scared, but I really don't have this loving relationship with you. I'm just checking, the box on the list.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But I know for me, especially, and this is a plug, but I've been watching The Chosen. So it's so interesting to just think about how, because when we're reading the Bible, we can just read the Bible versus like let me give this imagery. Like, what would it look like to really walk with Jesus? Not saying they have it totally right, but just to imagine that way.
Yeah.
And they were failing left and right, but they were very much committed though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so even though Peter would mess up, even though, they would make mistakes, they were still committed to this idea he's the Messiah. I'm going to follow him even if I mess up, you know?
Yeah, that's so good. And that reminds me of you've been going through Genesis, and I've been kind of reading
a lot of messed up people
through Genesis.
A lot of messed up people.
God used it, the people, there was always he gave us these examples of this guy versus this guy, and they go completely different directions.
Yeah.
But they're both pretty bad dudes. Both of them are not great people, but the ones that always go to God are the ones who believe and are committed to pursuing the Lord. Even when they make mistakes.
Yep.
Yeah.
The Lord actually that's who he uses, is those who are just following him.
Yeah.
So I love that example. I'm curious for both of you guys, looking forward, let's just take Christmas because it's coming up. It's this is the month. What are you looking forward to most this Christmas?
It's tough. My son's birthday.
There you go.
I'm sorry.
Good.
So not Jesus' birthday.
Not Jesus' birthday, but my son's.
Wow. I guess this Christmas, it's Esther's first Christmas, so that's cool. That brings its own uniqueness.
Yeah.
James is 9 now, so it's his 9th Christmas. I guess a cool thing that's been going on with James is I don't know if you remember a couple years ago, they did the play Dr. Newhart.
Yeah.
I remember that one.
I think that's a great imagery play, and it's so real for children. It's real for adults too, but it's so real for children because that question comes up a ton, where they are experiencing emotions they can't describe, and you are helping them uncover what the emotion is. And James has been getting that emotion a lot of just a high from the day of just excitement or whatever. And then he has to go to bed and he's just I just kind of feel empty and just kind of and he's trying to. And so we've been referencing that play almost weekly at this point with just him struggling with that emotion. So I'm pretty sure this Christmas is going to be one of those big ones for him where he's
going to have a big high and low.
And Alicia's talked about many times. I don't personally remember that Christmas for me, but Alicia's talked many times of a very specific Christmas where that happened for her. And it's I think that might be this Christmas for him. And so that's the cool thing about kids. You get to experience all these different perspectives naturally because you're walking other humans through things that you've either experienced or you are looking ahead and looking to experience and getting to reflect in your own heart. Okay, well, I'm not experiencing that emotion, but let me unpack what that emotion means for me even.
Yeah.
And so,
So cool. I think for me, I think I get really excited about that specific thing, but in people, but in people in my life, kind of, I guess, sharing an experience with somebody. I know that sounds really weird, but for me, it's I'm not, you guys both know me. Travis probably knows this more so. I'm not an excited type of person. For the most part. There's certain things that really
I don't know about that, bro.
I get really excited. But
tennis,
for the
cameras.
most part, for the most part, I'm just kind of I'm very level. It's not that I'm unhappy per se, but it's just I'm not, a very excited type of person. But what that means for me, though, through my life, I get really excited, sharing experiences with others who are really excited.
Yeah.
So I hope someday I have children, but I would love to experience kind of live vicariously through
I already
them.
told you to come over for Christmas,
and
he said, I've got family.
But we'll talk about that.
Cut.
I'm excited because the more, the older I get and the more we go through these seasons, the less I'm concerned about the kind of the worldly parts of them, you know? Seriously, I could care less about a lot of this worldly view on Christmas or whatever it is, like Easter egg hunting. Like, it's so weird.
What if they have like $100 inside of the egg?
Yeah, I love Easter egg hunting.
I'm sorry.
I won't be excited, but I'll be working for it for sure. No, it's one of those things where it's like, I love seeing like members of my family who are like just focused on the right things and like sharing that experience with them. That's, I think, what I'm most excited about this year. And I would say that I've had this kind of similar thing in previous years, but you mentioned it too. We work at a church, and so like for me, when I am here doing a service, like a Christmas Eve service, like I'm not necessarily experiencing that Christmas Eve service that somebody else is when they come into the church and they're hearing it and they're worshiping and they're like, I'm kind of behind the scenes doing the work. And so I feel like I used to be kind of sad, like I missed out on that. But the reality is like, I don't need that. Like, I'm excited that I'm able to provide and serve in such a way that somebody else can experience Christ in a new way.
Can I lean into that a little bit more? Yeah. So obviously our church contexts are a little bit different. Holidays can be hard for me because we have multiple services. So now I'm at church. Yeah. My wife is at home. Yep. And so I think that's what's tough on me. Is like, I don't mind serving. That's totally fine. Like, because it's fun. Like, God has wired me that way. So I enjoy it. But when I'm at work and then my wife, comes to a service, we sit together and then she goes home and then I'm still at work. Yeah. I'm thinking about being home. And so there's definitely a balance, and I'm trying to pray through and figure out what that looks like, but it's just different. That's probably the most difficult thing about the holidays for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's different. Like I think I have it. I'm very blessed in this way, where my wife's family lives in a different state. And so, man,
this is the third one. I'm so blessed. They are as far away as possible.
I hope Dave's not watching.
I'm so happy we can't cut this. So this is gonna be great to listen back to.
No, I mean I'm blessed in the way that like it's sad. Obviously, it's sad.
Obviously,
but it's nice because my wife and I we do like every others for Thanksgiving and Christmas. So like this year. We were here for Thanksgiving, and then for Christmas we're going to be in Colorado. Next year we'll be in Colorado for Thanksgiving and Christmas here, and so I kind of getting out on Christmas and Thanksgiving in different ways. Like when I'm in Colorado, like I get to experience it. I'm not working. So I think that like I'm just putting that in your face, like sucks to be you kind of a thing. No, but I definitely think it's important to value that. And I think it's different for me because I'm in a different season of life. I don't have kids. Like I'm not, it's that focus is less, I would say. But I don't know if you've ever felt that way, Travis. I don't know how you've dealt with it.
With what exactly? We went a few different places.
Yeah, I mean like what Navon is saying, where it's like trying to find that right balance where he is serving on those holidays, but then it's the longing to be with his family, and experiencing those things. Yeah,
I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like any situation where you have something to do that you can't be with your spouse or your kids. And I mean, that's some professions are a lot different than others. Some people are in the military and they're gone for months.
That's very true.
And so I'm glad that at least I get to go home to them. But and so, that's never been a personal difficulty for me. And so... but I mean, I understand that. There are certainly times that it's harder than others to be away for an extended period of time. But I guess we both have. It helps that she is so on board to be like, no, like it's important that you're doing that. Sometimes this is hard where she'll be like, yeah, I know it's beginning of the week and I had to put the kids down by myself and I have 3 more nights of doing that because of responsibilities. So there's times that it's harder than others, but in general, it's it's a blessing when we do get to sit together, do get to attend something together, and the times we don't, we recognize that it's the way God has set us up for now. Yeah. And it won't always be that way.
And imagine when we all kind of focus around this idea of like serving one another, because then we find blessings. Like, and I'm sure you've experienced this, Navon, but like. Even though I'm missing out on these services, like I'm being blessed in a different way. Like somebody's ending up serving me by bringing me like eggnog or whatever it is, like even if it's trivial
anyone could bring me eggnog at any time. I would just want to make sure that's.
But it's cool when we're serving each other, because that, like, again, that's why community is so important. Like we have this community, like God designed us to be in community. I don't know.
All I can think is eggnog now.
Yeah.
Like just community is an eggnog delivery system.
Instead of coffee, we could have had that.
Yeah. Next episode, maybe we have some.
Join
eggnog.
Community. They have eggnog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Navon, for coming on, and it's just been a blast. I wish you could stay. Like, let's just do let's do all month just with Navon.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We can do that in
stay
February.
Longer, right?
Yeah.
You can stay longer.
Oh, there we go. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we were very glad to see you. Very glad to have you on and be able to discuss the thing with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's been great. It's fun to hang out.
We'll do phone-ins next time. I'll give you a call if I ever need something on a podcast.
There you go.
Hey, just let me know.
Yeah.
I'm down.
Thank you so much for watching and listening and just joining with us as we're covering this new topic. And it's our hope that you get to experience and really become intentional about the reason for the season or the holiday or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Also, if you have questions, Navon's on, so if you have any questions regarding Navon, what he does, where he's from, or whatever it is, during
we'll reach
the podcast,
out to him and get those answered.
I thought you were about to say my phone number. I was like, that's so messed up.
No, just submit the questions on social media where this is posted.
Yep. And if you have any questions regarding anything this month, Travis and I, we're going to cover those at the end, just like we've been doing. So thanks again, and as always, God bless.